Bruchim Aboim. We are now on the second part of our series here, the lecture series here. We are up to the fifth book of the Torah, Devarim. We are on the fourth Sedra, the fourth portion, Reeh. And we are up to chapter 12, verse number 24. We are in the process of discussing eating meat, something that was really limited to the Jews in the desert. And here Moshe is talking to them about when they come into the land. In the desert, they were only allowed to bring a sacrifice to God in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle. And then they could eat meat. It would be what's called the peace offering, which we've discussed before. However, Moshe was also telling them about when they would enter the land, and then they would be able to eat meat even without it being a sacrifice. So in verse 24, Moshe Rabbeinu instructed them, Lo sochlena ala oretz ishbechena kamayim. He's talking about here in this verse about the blood. Now, blood in Judaism is never allowed to be eaten, not even your own blood, as I mentioned in the last lecture. It seems like the first thing a person does when they cut themselves is put their finger in their mouth while it's bleeding. It's not permitted. Not only that, imagine, and we've all done it, bite in an apple, and for some reason your gum bleeds, and there's a blood spot on the apple. Truth of the matter is, again, you should cut that out. You shouldn't eat it. We are not allowed to eat blood in any way, shape, or form, because it says, again, that the blood, that dam hu nefesh, that the blood is the soul, that the soul resides within the blood, and again, so there is a prohibition. The only time blood is used in a ritual way is, again, when there was a temple, and it would be either poured on the altar or on the side of the altar. But again, we do not drink, do not eat blood in any way. Again, in fact, Rashi here says, Lo sochlena azhar ledam hatamsis, that this is forewarning against the last blood that oozing out through the veins. This is the reason why we salt our meat. And that way, the salt, again, kosher salt is always thicker. When you buy it, it draws the blood out of the meat. As an aside, I haven't been religious all my life. I was always surprised that when I was not religious and I'd go to the supermarket and I would buy a nice piece of sirloin meat, something that was an expensive cut, and I would barbecue it, how I would cook it. It just didn't taste as good. And the truth is very logical as to why not. You see, kosher meat is salted. Salt is a bugle of taste, so to speak. It wakes up taste in anything. Eating something with salt and without salt are like two different worlds. So when you have a piece of kosher meat, it's salted. That salt is soaked through all the meat. It makes it much tastier. And also, even if you salt something when you're going to eat it, it's really on the surface. When you salt meat, you let it sit on that meat. It goes through the meat because it's drawing out the blood. So that may be one reason why people... I know when there was a butcher in an old Jewish neighborhood, and when it turned into a African-American neighborhood, after all the Jews left, he stayed. And within 5 years, he retired because he did a bang-up business with the new residents because they loved his meat. And that's probably the reason why, even though it was more expensive and kosher. Anyway, so it says that Lo sachleno ala orach kamayim, that when you have blood, you cannot eat it. What you need to do is throw it onto the ground like water. Now, when our verse states that you should pour the blood onto the ground and not into the ground, so what it does is it indicates, according to the Ramban, that covering the blood is not required here. Now, there is a mitzvah, a commandment to cover the blood, but not with domesticated animals. Again, the prohibition of eating the blood. But when it comes to blood from a bird or a wild animal that you would shecht, again, there are 7 wild animals that are kosher. Buffalo, would be one of them. So anything that's a wild animal, deer, harts, go shecht a giraffe. Anyways, then you would cover the blood. And again, but birds, we see that when people shecht. If you go for kaparas on Yom Kippur, where they used to shecht the chickens right there, you would see they would put dirt or sawdust on top of the blood. They would cover it. Continues in verse number 25, where it states, Lo saklein l'manit of lok, you should not eat it. Why? In order that it will be good for you. What do you mean good for you? So Rashi says here, a very interesting concept. Say ulumad. Rashi says, go forth and learn. that how great is the reward for the observance of the commandments, if in the case of blood, for which the soul of man has disgust, and he who abstains from it benefits himself and his children after him. We'll see that will be the blessing we'll have. Then all the more so will he reward her who abstains from robbery and incense, for which the soul of man is seized with desire, based on the Gemara in Makos. So again, it's a great lesson that God will always give us a reward, and again, like a benevolent father, always trying to give us the benefit of everything. It'll be good for you as it continues, levanecha acharech, for your children afterwards, just because you didn't eat the blood. Now, there is something we also learn from this, and that is you should eat kosher food so that you do not develop traits of cruelty. There's a saying in the world even today, you are what you eat. And then pass these traits on to your children, getting Rebbeonans and Abishits. So again, many of these things become generic. They become inherited. We pass them on. And by this thing about vanecha, your children, the rabbis learn out from here that even small children should be fed kosher food. There was a rabbi who said something very interesting. Of course, his children are brought up religious. He comically said that whenever there's a party and the children know there's candy in the house, no matter where they hide the candy, the children find it. And they want to get to it before the party. It's very hard to keep them away. He said when they go to the bank, though, and he goes through the drive-thru and the teller sees that there are children in the car, what they do is when they send back his receipt, they also send some candy for the children. And when the children see the candy, they get very excited. All he says to them, it's not kosher, and it's over. They're not interested anymore. And this becomes a way, again, of training children to, even at a young age, to know exactly what's proper and what's not. And it says, Kol kitase ha-yosher b'nei Hashem. So why is this important? Because you've done what is proper in the eyes of God. So one should not eat blood, not because it's repulsive, that's not the reason. Rather, one should not do it because it's not right in the eyes of God. People say that you shouldn't say, I don't eat pork because it's disgusting. No. You're supposed to say, I'm sure pork is delicious, and I can say the pork is delicious. I don't eat it because God said not to. And that becomes the key. So everything that we do because God wants us to do, to either to abstain or not. Again, it's whatever's the Ratzon Hashem, the will of God. And again, this is the law lefnim b'shuras hadin, so to speak, beyond the letter of the law. Continues in verse number 26. Rak kodeshecha asher yilecha, only holy things which you have. Then in the derecha tisa, and your vows you shall bear. Uvasa l'makom shivak Hashem, you should go to the place which God chooses. What does it mean? Rak kodeshecha, only holy things. So Rashi here tells us that although you're permitted to slaughter ordinary animals, I've not permitted you to slaughter consecrated animals. That means once you have vowed to give something to the temple, then you should not eat them in your cities without offering their sacrifice, or bring them to the temple. And then they would be eaten either by the Kohanim in the temple itself or by regular individuals within the walls of Jerusalem. Now, eating meat that is not sacrificial is considered to be tolerable, but not preferable. The preferred meat would be to bring a shlomim, a sacrifice to God, a peace offering. Now, it wasn't always practical in the sense that many people lived a great distance from the temple. So therefore, to bring everything up as a sacrifice. But if it was at all possible, a person would be best served to bring up a shlomim, peace offering to God, and include God and the Kohanim into your joy of being able to eat meat. One has to remember, we're talking about a time in history where meat was something that was very special for people to eat. Now, why are the words Asher Yeh Lecha mentioned, which you have? So, Rav Meir says in the Gemara in Chullin that better a person never makes a vow. And there Tosfos, one of the commentaries on the Gemara's, asks, we see that Yaakov, when he went to Lavan's house, when he was going to get a bride, and was sent by his parents to marry his Rachel and Leah and Zilpah and Bilhah, that he made a vow that's stated in the Torah, and the Medrash in Bereshit states that in a time of distress, one is allowed to make a vow. Again, we learned this lesson from Yaakov Avinu. Again, he was on the road, and he didn't know what was in front of him, what to expect. So therefore, all vows are connected in one form or another to certain troubles or difficulties. And so the Torah did not want to allude to trouble. There's a saying that goes, al tiftach peh, which translates means to open your mouth. We have a concept, do not open your mouth to Satan, to the devil, which is really very strange, because we know the devil's pretty smart. Gets us to sin in all kinds of ways. But the truth of the matter is that the devil is both blind and he has no mouth. So he can't see and he can't talk, but he can hear. And when we speak, when we open our mouth and we say things that are incorrect, such as speaking about other people, what we do is we allow the devil to have a mouth, and now he can accuse us. This is why the sin of lashon hara, of gossiping, is so great. And also the idea of the devil is blind, but when we sin, we act like no one can see, that God has no eyes. So every time we sin, we give him an eye, and the devil is now filled with eyes. So the two abilities to be able to see and speak are powers that we give to the side of evil. And if we live our lives properly, the truth is we don't have to deal with it. So al tiftach peh, a person should always watch what they say, and especially when it comes to cursing yourself. There's a special angel that takes those curses, and then at the least time when you don't want it, that's when it comes true. Also, and so the Torah correctly, connects vows to holiness, kiddusha secha, as it says in the verse, holiness. So, which are blessings. And also, if it happens, asher yil locha, that there might be perchance arise a situation which is not a blessing, again, that would be the only time if it was to protect yourself, so to speak. But generally, the rabbis would frown on people making vows based on the Belzer Rebbe. And it continues in the verse, in the derecha tisa, and after you make a vow, you shall bear the consequences of it. Now, if you look at the word Univareka tisa, that number one is if you vow to bring an animal to the temple as a sacrifice, and that animal is either stolen or it dies, you have to replace it. Again, you've made a vow based on Stam Torah. But if you take the last letter of the word Nidarecha, chaf, and you connect it put it at the end of the next word, which is Taf Shin Aleph. If you spell it backwards, it spells the word the Ishtecha, your wife. There's a story, a very cute story, told of Rav Mordechai of Chernobyl. Rav Mordechai of Chernobyl would travel around from place to place, and he would go to communities and see if he could help the community, the rabbi in charge, whatever he could do. He came to a certain town, and in this town, he checked in with the rabbi, and it seems that their mikveh, they had no mikveh. That originally there was a mikveh there, but that an epidemic had broken out in the town, and the health authorities in the town had padlocked the mikveh. They didn't feel it was sanitary enough. But in the town there was, of course, Moshe the thief. He said, don't worry about it, I can deal with this. So he broke the lock, and they continued to use the mikveh. Well, when the city fathers found that the Jews were using the mikveh, they put an end to that. What they did, they just bulldozed the mikveh to make sure no one could use it. So there was no mikveh. So when Mordechai came, the rabbi of the town, told him that they did not have a mikveh. So Mordechai said, why don't you build one? And they said, because we really are not a rich community, and building a mikveh is expensive. He says, aren't there any rich people in town? And the rabbi said, yeah, there's one, but he's very stingy, and he doesn't give much. So Reb Mordechai said, you know what, I'll be back in a week. Let's see what I can do. So they made an announcement that Reb Mordechai would be back. So a week later he came back, and as you can imagine, whenever a great rabbi comes to town, people come to him for blessings. And so he had a room in someone's house with an outside entrance, and people came, and they asked him for blessings, and he blessed the people. Just so happened that this Gevir, this rich man, he also came. He sat down, and Mordecai turned to him and said, "You're a wealthy man. What is it you need? You need a blessing for wealth. I assume you have money." He said, "No, Rabbi, I'm not here to have a blessing for wealth." He said, "Children?" He said, "No, thank God I've been blessed with children." "Health? You have issues with health?" And the man said, "No, thank God I'm healthy. My family's healthy." So Mordecai looked at him and said, "I don't understand. So why are you here? What is it you need?" So the rich man took his gaze off the rabbi and looked down, and he said, "My wife is a shrew. She makes my life totally unbearable. I just can't live with her anymore." He said, "Well, you should try to work it out." He said, "Rabbi, I've tried everything." He says, "Well, listen, in Judaism we do have an option of divorce her." And he said, "I can't afford to divorce her. My whole business came from her father. So I'm really not in a position to divorce her." So the rabbi just shrugged. He said, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, do the best you can." He said, "But there must be something that you can do to help me, to give me some sort of relief from this shrew that I'm married to. Maybe you can say something that she won't be as healthy." And he kind of heed and hawed. Mordecai looked at him and he said, "I give blessings. I don't give curses. I can't give you a curse." So he said, "But Rabbi, what can I do?" So Mordecai thought, and he says, "You know what? There is one bit of advice I can give you. You see, we have a precept in Torah that if a man makes a vow and he doesn't keep his vow, the punishment that he's given is that his wife will pass away. So my suggestion to you is the town needs a mikveh. So what you should do is tell the town fathers that you will build the mikveh, and not only that, you will support it with all of its expenses forever. And then, don't do anything. Don't build a mikveh, don't support it, nothing. And then you may wind up with what you're looking for." Well, the man was so happy with this great advice, he gave a great donation to Mordecai, and he walked out singing and whistling a tune. And he went home, and the first thing he did before he went home was went to the town father and said, "I want you to know I am going to build a mikveh. I'll pay for all the expenses, everything on me." And you can imagine how happy they were. About a day went by, a week went by, he did nothing. In the meantime, he's looking at his wife because he's not fulfilling the vow. Somehow, instead of her getting sick in any way, shape, or form, she seemed to be getting healthier. She seemed to be getting stronger day by day, and his life was just continuing to be more miserable and more miserable. And he didn't know what to do. So he went to Chernobyl, and he went to go see Reb Mordechai. And he told Reb Mordechai, he said, "Rabbi, I did exactly what you told me to do. The woman is a horse. She's getting stronger and stronger. Your advice is not working here." Reb Mordechai shrugged, and he says, "Well, I guess now you have no choice but to try to be nice to her and see what happens. In fact, here's my suggestion. Tomorrow morning, does she drink coffee?" He says, "Yes, she has a cup of coffee in the morning." He says, "Well, tomorrow morning, when she comes downstairs, wait for her at the foot of the stairs with a cup of coffee and say to her, 'Good morning, sweetheart. I thought you might like a cup of coffee. This is for you.' And see what happens." And the rich man kind of shrugged. He had nothing else, no other options. So he went home, and the next morning, sure enough, just as Mordecai told him, he stood at the foot of the stairs with this cup of coffee, and his wife came down with that bitter look on her face. And he sweetly said to her, "Good morning, sweetheart. I thought you might like a cup of coffee. This is for you." And she stopped, and she looked at him, and somehow her whole demeanor changed. And she said, "Thank you, dear." And from that moment on, all of a sudden, they became newlyweds. It was unbelievable. She changed completely. And he was thrilled. He couldn't believe how happy he was. But then all of a sudden, she sneezed. And the next thing you know, she was coughing. And then all of a sudden, she looked a little bit flush. And then all of a sudden, she's laying in bed and she's not doing well. And the doctors were called. and somehow they could not diagnose what was wrong. And he was beside himself, and he ran to see Reb Mordechai. And he told the tzaddik, Rabbi, she finally got good, and now she's laying there, and the doctors think she's going to die. What should I do? And Mordechai looked at him and smiled. He says, well, I guess you're going to have to build a mikveh. And he had to build a mikveh and support it so that he would have a wife that was a pleasure to be around. It continues in the verse, and it says, V'yasiso elosecha habasar v'hadam al mizbach Hashem elokecha. And you should make your burnt offerings of the flesh and the blood on the altar of the Lord your God. Again, a sacrifice. V'dam zavachecha, and the blood of your sacrifice, yishafek al mizbeach. You should pour onto the altar Hashem elokecha habasar tochel. And Lord your God, and you shall eat the flesh. So you eat the flesh, but God gets the blood. You do not partake of blood. Continues in verse 28. Shemar v'shamati is ace, kol hadvar me'ela. Observe and hear all of these words. Asher anochi mitzaveka, which I am commanding you. And Rashi here tells us, Zu Mishnah, this implies the study of the oral law, which you must keep within you, and that should not be forgotten. For it is a pleasant thing if you keep them with you. Rashi says, if you study, it is possible that you will hear and observe it. And Rashi says the words ha, kol she'ena b'klal mishnah, ena b'klal maisa. Because we have a precept that anyone who is not in the category of studying is not among those who will do the action correctly. Now here, by the way, we see that initially the Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral Torah, was exactly that. It was oral and passed on from mouth to mouth. There was, in fact, until the end of the Second Temple era, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi edited the Mishnah. It was the first time the oral tradition was written down, which was a great blessing for us. Because again, we know that the written Torah was bastardized by both the Christians and the Muslims, because it was written. The oral tradition, there was nothing for them to look at. So again, that was why they make the mistake. For example, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, we know is monetary. They take it as written. That if someone knocks out your eye, you knock out their eye. Again, so these are many, many things. Without the oral tradition, there are many laws we don't understand. So, Shomer v'shamati, because again, that aim bor yirachet, as I said from Rashi, that if a person does not learn, he cannot fear God, nor can he know what to do. Now, if you study so as not to forget, it says that 101 times, if a person learns 100 times, the Gemara says he's great, 101 is even greater. 101 is the numerical value of the angel Michael, who is the angel of Torah and memory. In fact, if you take the word zachor, which means to remember, which is numerical value of 227, and you take the word shechoach, meaning to forget, has numerical value of 328. You subtract 227 from 328, the difference is 101. Reviewing your learning 101 times makes a difference between remembering and forgetting. Again, as I said, back in those days, the written word was very hard to come by. Everything had to be put onto a parchment of sorts. Again, so it was people had to memorize everything. So Shomer also refers to the written Torah and those laws Moshe Rabbeinu had taught them. The Shemata refers to rabbinic law, which they had yet to hear. Also, that if you want answers to questions of faith that trouble you, first Shomer, do the mitzvah, and then the end result will be Shemata. You'll be able to understand, much like the wise son in the Haggadah, who was asking, "What are these laws to you?" He's only asking after he has already done the mitzvah to understand it better. And it says, "Es kol devarim," all of these things refers to fulfilling both Torahic and rabbinic laws. Meaning, es kol devarim, all the laws. If not one, then if one is not done, that he's not truly kept them. So kol, we are not allowed to pick and choose. All means all of everything. Since every mitzvah is what we call Ratzon Hashem, the will of God, they are all equal in regard to observance, even though they may not be equal in the difficulty or cost. But in the end, every commandment is what we call Ratzon Hashem, the will of God. The best example I give is that, again, we refer to God as our king. That if a king were to tell you that he wanted you to protect him, to stand as a bodyguard and put your life for his, and if you say, "No way," you're put to death. the king asked you to protect him. But what if the king said, you're sitting in this seat, move over one more seat. And you say, I'm comfortable here. What difference does it make whether I sit here or I sit there? So you don't move. Well, guess what? You're executed because the king gave you a direct command and you said no. So it makes no difference whether it's something we perceive as big or small. Any command from a king is the law, and a person who goes against it is culpable with his life. So we see that all laws really carry the same amount of weight. And it says, "These asher noki mitzavecha." Usually it mentions chukim, mishpatim, and eidos. It breaks down the laws into three categories of statutes, civil laws, and testimonies. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to include these things that are lifnim mishuras adin, that are over and above these three categories, to say that they should act in a spirit of voluntarily serving God rather than under compulsion and threat of punishment based on a tour. When you really love something, you go past what it is. I'll never forget one of the things that warmed my heart more than anything else that I've ever seen. It was my wife would feed my children. She wouldn't wipe their faces, she would lick their faces. And brought tears to my eyes. It's the love that a mother has for a child. Nobody tells you to do that. It's just something that you spontaneously feel because of the great love and the expression of it. It says, L'man yitiv l'cha, so it'll be good for you. U'levanecha acharecha, and your children after you. That there will be adherence to these rabbinic decrees that will ensure that you'll bring up children who will also be Torah observant Jews. Again, when they see how much you care and how much love and attention you put in, they will be a reflection of you. This will be ad olam, forever, kisase hatov v'yosh b'nei Hashem, because you have done that which is good and proper in the eyes of God. Hatov means be'enei shemayim, in the sight of heaven. V'yosher means be'enei adam, in the eyes of man. Let's go a little further. Verse 29, and when the Lord God shall cut off the nations where you are ready to dispose them that are before you, again the 7 nations in the land of Canaan, and you will depose them, and you will dwell in their land. Now the Al-Shik says, these warnings are not for those of the nation of Israel who are standing before Moshe Rabbeinu now, but for those who would inherit in the future. Again, Moshe Rabbeinu, as a prophet, was looking forward into time. And then, even if you have a choice between a Jewish town outside of Eretz Yisrael, interesting law, or a Gentile town in the land of Israel, better for a person to live among Gentiles in the land of Israel than to live outside of Eretz Yisrael. Because it says in the Gemara Ksubas, whoever lives in the diaspora outside of Israel is like a person who has no God. Again, based on his Naim Torah. It says that if a person just walks in the land of Israel for 4 cubits, again, he's the Ben Olam Haba. He has a place in the world to come. We have no idea about the sanctity of the land. Again, the palace of the king. And just like we believe in the concept of mitoch, which means that which is not done in the name of God will be done in the name of God. It's one of the reasons why you see little children dressed up as little rabbis, with white shirts, black pants, and long side locks. Do they know what they're doing? No. But that which is done as out of rote, that you teach them, even though it's not done for the proper reasons, will eventually be done for that. So too better someone lives in Eretz Yisrael for any reason, because the holiness of the land has the power to change it into the right reason, based on the Magister Rebbe. So again, whatever reason, your company sent you there, you can make more money there, you like the climate, whatever it might be. But the key becomes just living in Eretz Yisrael. Again, is a blessing, and it may actually churn a person and make him, again, serve God in a much better way. Verse number 30, Shamlecha, guard yourself, and Tinoka Shacharim, least you'll be ensnared after them, meaning the people of the land. After you destroy before you, Upendridros Laheham, Lemoram, least you'll acquire after their God, saying, how did they serve their gods? And I'll do the same. Rashi here says, after you will see that I will destroy them from before you, you should get your heart set to understand for what reason were these people destroyed? And the answer is because of their corrupt deeds, which were upon their hands, yet therefore should you not do, lest you come to be destroyed also. So look and see what they did. It was wrong. And if you follow in their footsteps, you will have the same end that they did. And this is a warning of the general principle of ethical behavior over and above that which is specified in the Torah. Now, when it says how they served, so the Rambam disagrees with Rashi here and states that the Torah had warned the nation of Israel often enough not to serve idols. Rather, this is a warning to the people not to adopt the heathen forms of worship and apply them to the worship of God, since it would be an abomination in the eyes of God. We do things differently than the Gentiles. In Europe, Gentiles would wear black shoelaces. Jews would wear colored shoelaces. We put our feet together so as not to move. When we pray, the Christians will hold their hands and cross and put them together and to wind them, so that they're so to speak shackled by their hands. We shackle our feet. So we don't do that. We don't hold our hands that way. We do not imitate what they do. Again, this becomes a Torah concept. And it continues in verse 31. And with that, we will finish up chapter 12. Lo sasakein l'Hashem Elokecha, you should not do the same to the Lord your God. Ki kol to'avas Hashem shasane aso le'Eloheim, because all the abominations to God which they have done to their gods. Ki gam misbeneim v'snoseim yisorfu ba'esh le'Eloheim, because even their sons and their daughters they burn in fire to their gods. So Rashi says it comes to teach us here that if it is the custom of idols to be worshipped in another manner, what if that not just bowing or bringing sacrifice, such as to uncover oneself for pa'or, that the idol was served by a person defecating in front of it, or to markulis, where they would throw stones at it, whatever it would be, but sacrificing and offering incense and performing libations and bowing down, even if it's not the mode of worship of that idol, of that false god, still a person would be guilty based on the Gemara and Sanhedrin. Now Rashi also tells us, based on Rabbi Akiva said, I saw a heathen who bound his father before his dog, and the dog ate the father. Again, people served their gods. All idols seem to be angry gods, and people would try to placate them. Again, they would bring their children up to the fire god and burn them alive. Again, so they sacrifice one child to protect the rest, and this was the mindset of idols. That's why, in fact, when Yisro came, he brought a sacrifice to Elohim, to God of severity, and they told him, no, we bring our sacrifices to Hashem Elokecha, to the Lord your God, God of mercy first. And he was amazed that it's not two different people. The God is able and wants to show mercy before anything else. And with that, I think we'll stop here at the end of chapter 12. And God willing, next week we'll begin with chapter 13. Again, may God bless you with happiness and joy to you and your family, protect you and yours with all that's good. And God bless and have, again, Shabbat Shalom. Again, if you did not hear, I mentioned earlier that we're doing Zoom for the earlier part of the lecture. If you have any questions at the end of my thoughts, please unmute yourself, and we'll leave 10 minutes for any questions that you might have on any topic. I'll be trying to do the best I can to answer them. God bless and be well. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for attending.